Creating the phone app, and then kind of talking about how it fits into the scheme of things on your process of entering data. Okay, the smartphone app, and this is on either an iPhone or an Android, and you can use this to help you enter your check-in information or your book record information. In our particular club, at our church, we use the check-in information. We have vans that go out and pick up kids. And so one of the vans, the person that rides with the driver has a smartphone, and as the kids get on the van, they ask them the questions and check them in. And so when the van arrives at the door of the church, those 15 kids go right into the main meeting area and do not pile on the secretary at once. So whoever thought of that was a great idea. I'm not sure even who came up with it, but that's one application. But you can have, like for instance, your book records, your individual handbook leaders, depending again on how you set up your groups, could be entering that information as they go. Just depending on how technology savvy everybody is in your group, how you want to use that. But you can use some of it in some ways and however you want to. So here's what it looks like. I press the check-in screen. This is your login information. If you're online, it's the same 3 pieces of information you use to get into your online. And then it goes to a list of names. And I just pick the name of the child I'm interested in. And it's going to have the same list of check boxes. I check the ones off as I go and click on submit. And that's it. Now the system goes, it's in the database. If it's online, immediately I see that information in my main application if I'm in there. Back in the section information, book records, same criteria for logging in. You press the name of the child you want to enter. It's going to give you a list of all of the different book units. A D in front means that one's already done. I don't need to look at it. They're all gone. Numbers in front give me an indication of how many boxes. Doesn't tell me which ones, but tells me how many. So a quick reference, I can look at this list without having to drill down into each individual one to see what needs to be done. I'm going to go in here. I just passed section number 2 or section number 3. It's going to timestamp it and then send it. Now automatically it's in the database again. I'll see it right away. So this is for the online version. I have both check-in and book entry. I have the same phone app that I can use for my desktop version, but it's limited. There is not the online connection, so there's not the immediacy. As soon as I make my check-in, it goes in there. But here's how the process works. First of all, I need to tell the system by uploading something what my list of names are going to be. And then I use my smartphone app to enter that information. It's going to stick in the database on the cloud. And then I get back on my desktop again at a later time and run a program on the desktop that will in turn say, give me all those names and load them back down. So that's the process. It's kind of a manual, multiple-step process, but it can be done on the desktop too. But that's just check-in. You cannot use section entry on the desktop system. So that's kind of where your limitations are. Does that make sense? Yes?
What if you accidentally hit the wrong button? Can you...
Okay, so I just hit this one. I just hit it again.
Oh, okay.
He's out.
Okay.
Same way with the check-in screen. It'll take it. So, and it doesn't. You don't need to be concerned about 2 people checking in the same person. It will take, if it's already there. So if I checked in Joe and I said he brought his, he was here and he brought his uniform, I wore his uniform, and somebody 2 minutes later said he was here, he brought his uniform, and he brought his Bible, you'll end up with just those 3 pieces of information. It won't be a problem if you double up on it. But if you're using the program and someone's already done it with the app and you're online, when you pull up the check-in screen, you're going to see those boxes already checked anyway. It would just be a desktop situation where you haven't uploaded it yet, and you may not see it. But either way, it'll be fine. Okay? And also, it will default to the current date, but if you're entering information for a different date on the main screen, this year we added the feature that you can go in and change what day I'm looking at. So I can say, well, I was going to enter it for the 18th, and then I can go in and now all my dates will be timestamped the 18th, even though it's the 20th today. So I can do that. Okay? And there's no extra charge for the phone apps, they just go with the package. that you're using.
So is the phone app Arc Web? Is that what it's called? Or
Yes, that's what you'd search for either on the Play Store or the
App Store.
Apple Store. Is just you use the word Arc Web, no spaces, and I think it's the only thing that shows up.
Yep. It is.
Okay? All right. Okay, this is kind of in-depth and detailed, but we're going to try and get our hands around what points and shares look like in conjunction with groups and group types. I kind of have to talk about both subjects together because they're related to each other in a lot of ways. But first of all, let's talk about points and shares, and then we'll talk about how that relates to groups. So back again to those a couple of screens, the setup options screen. That's one way we can talk about shares and points, and I'll also bring up the session field screen at the same time so that we can see both of those together. Looking at the options screen, you can see right there in the middle where it says section points, section shares. I can tell it how many points I'm going to assign for every section that's done. I can tell it how many shares or Awana bucks, same thing, I can assign for every time that they pass a section, and also the review. If a section is being reviewed, the system knows about that, and you can actually assign the same number of points, or you can give it a different value if you want to. So that's how I can assign points or shares for sections that are passed. For session information, same idea. I pick something from the list, and I have down here at the bottom, down here there where the points and shares are. Again, I'm assigning a point value or a share value for those particular things that are being tracked. So this is how I give my incentives and points, and then the system will then calculate based on what you've entered, how many total points that child has got, or based on how the groups are set, how many points a particular team has got altogether. Okay, does that make sense in a general sense? Okay? All right.
Shares is like
Awana bucks.
Correct, yep, shares is like Awana bucks, yep. Okay? So now the question is, how am I going to structure all that? Groups and group types allow you to do that in a lot of different ways in detail. Let me tell you some possible scenarios of what your club might look like. And then you can hopefully imagine what you could do differently if it wasn't exactly that way for you. One possible setup would be is I'm going to have a group type that basically mirrors my club. So I have a group type called Sparks, a group type called TNT, a group type called Trek. Then within those group types, I'm going to define multiple groups. So within my Sparks group, let's say I'm going to have 4 handbook leaders, and I'm going to have Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Jones, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Roberts. And they're going to be my groups, okay? And they're going to have my kids assigned. So I'm going to have these 4 leaders. They always have the same group of kids every week. And so I'm going to put them in that group. So then I have them as my individual groups. Okay? So when Mr. Jones comes up to me and says, I want a list of my Sparks kids, what I can do is I can go into my report screen, club or list, and on this screen right here, his name's going to appear in that team group list. So then I can pick his name out of the list and give him just his stuff. And that applies to attendance information, section, anything, any other reports. You've got almost every report has got all of these fields that you can choose from, so I can do individual information. And now, also, as it relates to the smartphone app, I can also tailor to that information as well. The check-in information and the section information are kept track of separately. You may notice that when I go into individual check-in, it has some pre-checked things in there. It remembers that by user, what you did last, and pulls that same information up. But that's also applicable to the phone. So if I set up, my login here is D Harding. If I log in as D Harding and go into my check-in and pick certain options and click OK, and I get my list of kids that show up, that's the same list I'm going to see on here when I download. So I can go in, if I make a login, in my example I had, let's say all 4 of my Sparks leaders were going to all enter section information on their phone. So I'd make 4 logins, and on each login I'd go in one at a time and go into individual sections and say, I'm gonna pick my particular, Mr. Jones out of this, and then my list of kids comes up. Once I've done that, now the system is going to remember, by my login, these are my selections by check-in. So when I go to my phone and download my list of kids' names, that's what's gonna show up on here. Okay? So each smartphone can have a different list of kids. And also, within the same smartphone, I can have a different list on check-in than I do for sections. So maybe one of those 4 leaders that we just talked about is responsible for checking in all the sparks. And then the other 3 are just responsible for sections, and this other guy's responsible just for a limited list. So it can be different based on that. Okay?
And so you create a separate login for each of them?
Yes, you'd separate login for the purposes of the computer being able to remember what their preferences are. So they get a list of just their kids and not all 80 of them that they have to scroll through.
Is that printable, that group list? So like, you have your clubbers assigned to a leader and you have your leader group. Can you
Yep.
print just those students in the last section they completed?
Yes. So there's a report called Last Section Said. Clubber last section that you can print out
That's under,
under sections, yep. And so then, of course, you can, if you want to pick it out just for that group, then that's the same, like I said, the same option screen is going to show up. So I can pick it under team and just have it just pick that one Sparks leader that's in there, because I can pick it under the team as well. And limit it down
okay, and
just to
team
that.
is where the leader's name
That's
will
the
be.
leader's name will be, yep.
Okay, cool.
So you're talking login, you're not talking up under the security feature where each user of the online one is given a different password?
No. Well, yes, you do have to go, you still have to set them up that way. So under, the minimum is you're gonna have to go in here under security and user administration and add a login
Okay,
for each person that you're gonna wanna have do something special with the phone app or whatever.
okay, but as the administrator, then you can change what they access.
Oh, yes.
Rather than just
Yeah,
club.
that's a separate discussion, but definitely that, let me go through that real quick. You set up a user administration here, and then you'd go underneath security, and each of those things that show up, reports by user, clubs by user, groups by user, window security, those are all things that tell you what that user can and can't do. So you can either make them administrator, meaning they default, they can do everything, or if you don't make them an administrator, then they default to do nothing, and then you have to go in there and say what things they can do.
Is that
Okay,
on the online version also?
It is, same thing applies to both.
Okay.
so that's how, when they're checking in, because you said the program will remember the login.
Yes,
So if I set up as the administrator too, here's what you can access, here's your group you can access, then when they log in on their phone, that's the
Right.
group they will
if their purpose is just to log in on the phone,
and check in.
I would say for your purposes, don't, just set it up, make it an administrator because it's easy, because they're never gonna get on and access your system directly. They're only gonna use it on the phone. You don't really care about all that detail. Your purpose of having the login there is just to get that thing in there so they can remember what the list is.
Oh,
They're probably never gonna access the main program, right?
right,
So it's not, just make them an admin to make it easy for you.
okay.
Um,
So that's not how you're selecting the group.
Right, if there's somebody who's gonna be using the main program that you wanna limit what they can get at, then you wanna go through all that work
Okay.
to say what they can and can't see. Otherwise, I'd say it's not worth all the trouble.
But as far as calling up just the group that they want to check in, that's not where you set
That's
it
not
up.
where you do it. You're
Okay.
doing it based on what you selected in the check-in screen or in the section one.
Okay,
It remembers
Do you
that.
think for security purposes, though, is it valuable to go ahead and not leave them as administrator, even though it's easier?
If we're talking
Just for
about,
liability,
yeah,
well,
we're talking about online, yes, probably.
just for liability.
Yeah, because if they got a hold of the church ID, then they'd have enough information to get in.
I'm not saying that anybody
No.
would, but if anything was to come up,
Yeah.
or if anything was to come up with the kids or anything like that, just for liability.
One less person that you'd have to worry about having access to, yep, sure.
So it's kind of worth the trouble to.
Yeah.
okay.
Do you both work for the same thing, like the online and the Android, or whatever, or the password?
Yes,
So
yes.
maybe they could take their password on their iPhone and go to our church when they do it?
If they knew what the church ID was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or if you're talking about desktop,
I'm not a desktop.
oh, online, yeah. Then that one piece of information, yeah, the one piece of information they need would be the church ID, and then they would. So her point is pretty good there. If you had just that, you would. So you might want to make them have some limits there so that they
So
can.
do you have a limit for how many users that you can set up?
Nope. No limits. Okay? Alright, so we've talked about points and shares, how they're assigned, and we've talked about groups and group types and how you might want to use that. But let's talk about, okay, so what do I do with this information? So we talked about already in our first session how the point totals report shows up. Let me just show you some pieces. You might have an individual under group points. This would be where you would enter information about game time, for example. We talked about the group type being TNT, Sparks, whatever. If you have a game circle time where you have those particular groups that you're using, so you have a game circle time, you might give points for everyone who is first and some other points for everyone who's second. That can be included in that point totals report. And by entering it here, this is how you're getting it into the system. And then overall, when I go back to my points at the beginning here, we talked about that is also going to take, so this combines both the individual information as well as that information I've entered in group points into one big piece to give them a points value report that they can print out.
Okay, can you go back just one to the, okay, so you're saying when you show up at game time.
Yep.
What was the screen you hit to enter for the team information as the games are going?
Individual group points.
Okay,
And then I would go in, add I'd pick their name out of this list, so I'm going to do Sparks, and then I'd put in 150 for red, 200 for blue, and so on. And then I would just say add, and then that puts that in for that date.
and, okay,
Now
and
it's
so
gonna
then that
include
would then total any kid that was on blue, green, whatever.
Is going to get that many points in their group total that you're going to print out also. Okay?
So is this where we could change our TNTers? Because all our TNTers now are different in game points.
Right.
They're different, they're all different. So is this where we could do that?
I think so, if I'm understanding what you're saying, because then you'd assign them with a team, with a group type of TNT, and then any points you assign here goes into that team pool as a whole.
Okay, so like our red, blue, green, yellow TNTers,
Yeah.
when they go to group time, that red, blue, green, yellow is all different.
Okay,
Different people, different kids,
Okay.
they've all
the
moved
colors
around.
changed.
Right, so,
So then you really have two different assignments that change during the night? That sounds a little tricky.
that's why I do it all by hand.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that one.
Okay. No, but we could still do Sparkies and just do TNTers by hand. That would save me a lot of.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I haven't said this time, but I'll say it. Use the parts of the program that work for your situation, and the ones that don't work for your situation, not a big deal. You know, there's some situations you have some unique situations you have to handle different ways. Okay, along the same lines as shares. So what do I see for shares? There's a report called Shares Report under Points and Shares, and this gives for you information about the shares that were earned, in the various different ways they can be earned, and then in that spent column, you would see information about what was spent during store night. So let's say you're going through club and you do store night once a quarter. So I've been doing this, all the points are totaled up, I print this report out, this tells me how many shares they have to use, and so then store night has happened. Now what do I do with that information? I can go back to another screen, individual shares spent, and that comes up with a screen that's very much like the check-in screen, where I can enter the shares that were spent for each child. That in turn will show up. That in turn will show up on this report, so that my balance then indicates on my 9th week what they have left to spend, and so on, and keep accumulating as you go along. What piece of this you use is entirely up to you. Some clubs like to say, when I put that bucks in their hands, they're responsible. If they lose it, it's their fault. You know, and then you may not want the program to track all this, but you can decide what you want to use and what you don't want to use. For our club, our cubbies never see a buck. We use the software to tell them what they have and what they've spent and what they've got left. So we keep totally on there. The Sparks, we put an envelope on the back of their book, and we put the shares in there, and we tape it shut. And so unless they open it up and tear them out, they're there to be used. TNT and Trek, we give it to them in their hot little hands, and if they lose it, that's their fault. So, but that's just our situation. You can do it however you want, but you can see how sometimes you'd want the program to keep track of it, and sometimes you don't. Maybe you want it to be a backup in case they say, I lost my bucks, but then you have the situation about they lost it, and oh, suddenly I found them again.
Yeah.
Here they are.
So there is a
So-
way before the screen to just pick up cubbies.
Right, sure, yes. Again, so you have the option here, in here, just like all the rest
Okay.
reports. I can pick whichever one I want to see,
Right.
and then I can see just those. Yes,
So like, let's say the final quiz is give each child an extra 1,000 points or something.
right.
How do you actually track that? Same way as this, you just give them 1,000 points for each person?
Oh, so if there's some situation where you want to assign a group of individuals some points, you can do it in the individual point screen. So then I'm assigning by some criteria a list of kids. So,
You wouldn't do the group points?
well, a group points means that everybody, if I assign a group point 100 points, that means when I have my group totals, I'm going to do all the individuals, and then I'm going to add 100 on top for a grand total.
I see. Okay.
This means I'm going to give each individual that many points,
Okay.
depending on how you're structured in your club.
Okay,
Okay?
so how do
So
you,
how would you tell it that you've got?
how would you pick those specific kids?
Okay. So let me find a. Let's see, I'm going to have to find a club night here. $116. See if I can pull this off here. Okay, so I've got a bunch of names here, and I can limit them based on some criteria. If I want a list of only those that are in TNT Ultimate Adventure 1, that's going to give me my list. Now, and then I tell them how many points I want to assign. I actually pick which ones I want. So I hold down the control key, I can say only these 3 kids. So my grouping is still just to help me cut the list down. It still doesn't tell me how many. By picking these 3 and then putting in the points associated with them and clicking on add, that's going to give just those 3 that many points. Okay? So it's a way to get the list shorter, but it doesn't have to be everybody. You can select them all if you want to, but you don't have to.
And then the reference would be like Bible quiz or
Yes, you
something?
can put in there whatever, something to help
Okay.
you remember.
So we would
Yeah.
know what
Yeah.
they're for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Why in the world?
So that's the point that you assign, so when they earn the point, how do you record it? Do you,
You'd go back into this screen for these particular points assignment. The other ones, would be assigned automatically when you do the sections and the check-in stuff.
okay.
This is just kind of extra things outside the box that you would have where you want to assign points to a group of people for something.
Oh, so those wouldn't pop up somewhere?
Well, the point totals will be in your list. Like
Okay.
when I have my team groups, they'll be part of that.
Okay,
Or my individual lists.
okay,
But it's not a part of my normal procedure of check-in and sectioning.
right.
Yeah. Okay? All right. Now down into the 4th section, we've kind of talked about assigning kids to teams and printing out lists. Who you assign is printed out by the color team. So back on the main screen, you have this team box. That's where you're going to pick the team that you're going to put them in. And I'm going to get somebody, I had a journey question here. I'm going to go back to something else. This is where I would get the team that I've got to choose from. And in setup, maintenance, team group club, this is where I assign what my team groups are associated with. So I've got a team group called Sparks, and I told it that Sparks is the only club that I want that to show up for. And I've got a TNT Girls and a TNT Boys group. Whoops. TNT Girls and a TNT Boys. There we go. And TNT is the only one I want them to show up for. So that limits my list. So if I tell them that this child is in Trek, automatically, so here you see the team group is Sparks. Let me go to somebody who is in Trek. And now you can see my list is only TNT Boys and TNT Girls. So by going into that screen and telling it something about the groups that you've chosen, you've got less chance for error because you can't pick something that doesn't belong. So you won't ever see, I've got a TNT person assigned to a Sparks group, that doesn't make, that won't happen because it won't ever show up as a possible list. So that's one way to narrow that down, and just simpler because it's quicker. You have less to choose from, and thereby you can get it done faster. Setup, maintenance, team group club. That's how I assign what clubs a particular team group is applicable for.
Can I ask you a question? It might be another question, but if it already has a club I mean, if you already have a box that says club, and
Right.
club is TNT, why would team be important? Because you can specify girl and specify boy.
The team level thing would be like I was talking about, if you really wanted to have by a leader what their kids' responsibilities are or something like that, where you do, if that's what you're looking for. If someone comes up and says, I want a list of just my kids or something like that, then it's
You need
good
to have
for-
that team, it will
team
sort
concept.
it by club.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
pick that
Fine.
stuff out.
Just helps me understand why.
Yep, sure. That's
So
good.
after you assign, the kid, particular kid to Spark, can you assign like in the yellow, like she also yellow team,
Yes,
green team?
yes.
How do you?
There's always that too. Right underneath the team then is the color that you have that you can assign them to as well.
And can I print a report, it's showing which color, which kids are under which color team?
Right. So that would be under reports and point totals. That second one right there is color teams. If I want to know the Sparks color teams, that gives me a list of the kids' names and what color they're on. Give me that, zoom it in just a little bit there. Okay? Okay.
Color team.
We talked about entering scores and printing out a score sheet, shares balances, and shares spent. Okay? With the time that's remaining, I want to talk about payments, ordering, and inventory. This is one of those parts, especially of the ARC software, that you may decide, I don't want to do any of this. Because of the complexity, because of the way your club works, because you don't have a lock on the door and the books just seem to disappear, all those kinds of things. I'm going to go through the options and the pieces and parts of it and how they benefit you, but again, make your decision based on how it's going to fit with your club, whether it's really going to save you any time or not. In your situation with the leaders you're working with, it may not. And so, again, take it or leave it as you see fit. The first thing I want to talk about is payments. And payments means not only things that the child has paid for, but also awards that they've earned. You can see their entire history of everything that has to do with inventory for that child for the year. And it's done for you more or less automatically. And you can enter in manually the stuff like books that they bought, uniforms they purchased, to round that out if you wish. Let's talk about some situations that might occur in your club and how the payment entry can help you. First of all, you have a situation where a child has come up and said, I need a book. I just passed my entrance booklet, I need a book. So you give them a book, but they haven't paid for it yet. They don't have the money for it, they're going to pay you at a later date. Okay? So you want to know that and keep track of that. So going into inventory, payment entry, you would enter their information, and then you would say, based on whether or not a box down here is checked, whether or not they've paid it or not. So in this particular situation, you gave them the book, so that means it was reduced from inventory, but they haven't paid for it yet, and so you leave that paid box unchecked. Okay? So what this is going to do for you then is at a future point in time, you can go into the reports menu, select out of the inventory section the payment report, and down here at the bottom left where it says if paid, you say no, and then that's going to give me a list of everybody who hasn't paid. So I take this list out and I can run around and say, if you have the money for this or whatever, So that's going to help you track that information to whether it's paid or not. Okay, another situation that might happen. You have someone who's passed their entrance booklet and is ordering a uniform. So they come up to you and say, I need size extra large and it's $22 and here's the money, but they don't have the uniform. You're just taking the money and you're going to order it. So what you do in payment entry then, in that situation, is you would leave the paid box checked, because they checked it, but you'd uncheck the reduce inventory, meaning they haven't actually received it yet. And so, again, your report here can work with you on that one. And now I'm going to say it's an inventory item, and it has not been reduced from inventory yet. And now the list that I'm going to get is going to reflect that. And so when I get my order in, and I have this TNT extra large, and I go, who does that belong to? This list tells me. And so I know exactly who it belongs to and who's supposed to get it. And then you can go back into the payment screen and check that box, meaning you gave it to them, and now it'll no longer show up on this list when you run it again.
Does it timestamp that, or it just is a box, a copy box?
It doesn't tell you when it happened, no, it just checks, just a checkbox, yeah. It just didn't happen. Actually, internally in the program it does, but it's not something you can get at.
Yeah.
So it is not credit card if we don't charge for books and vests to individual child account, so it is not credit card to use it.
It might be from a standpoint of whether you've given it to them or not, but if you're not in turn actually asking for the money back, then you probably don't use the first half that I talked about, about whether they paid or not. That's probably not something you're gonna track. But you still could use it on the second part about they've ordered a uniform and have it, and keep track of who it belongs to and whether I've given it to them or not yet. So that part you could use.
Where was the part about keeping track of which translations when you handed out the books?
Oh, I put that on the main screen here under the custom fields
Okay.
definition,
Okay.
and I had a list of choices here, NIV, King James, New King James.
Okay.
That was something you added.
Yeah, that's something I added, custom field, it's not on yours unless you put it in there.
If you don't keep track of your inventory via ARC and you want, but you do want to keep track of the money part of it,
Yeah,
can you do that?
that's basically what I talked about, so at this
Okay,
point in
so
time,
yeah, you
if
don't
that's-
have to have an inventory
Yeah.
listed in there, it's not gonna mess it up. It's just-
and I'm kinda doing it in that order. So this, you could do just payment entry and nothing else, and that's all you have to do, okay? So
And that
that's,
would keep track of dues too? Would that keep track
Yeah.
of, like, when they
So-
pay dues, you can say dues are 75 cents a week?
right, so when I go in, I would put in, I'd leave the item, inventory item blank, and put in the description field that it was dues and the amount, and a reference if it was a check written or cash or whatever, if I wanted to do that, and I could keep track of dues paid that way. If you were talking
So when
about,
you just click, when you do like check-in and
Yep.
they click dues,
yep,
that, will it just keep track via that direction?
if you're keeping track of dues, and if they pay like 50 cents or 75 cents every week and drop it in a bucket, you can use this box to check on the check-in screen, but you'll have to do a little bit of manipulation, maybe every quarter or something, go into their screen, print out how many dues they paid that quarter, and maybe make an entry in payment,
Okay.
so it's part of your total. It doesn't directly
It
link,
doesn't directly
No.
link to
no,
that?
but you
Okay.
can use that information to make a manual entry
Sure,
if you want to.
okay.
Yeah.
And if they pay for the whole entire year, is there an option to have that box already?
Yes, you can go back the other way. That's here on the main screen where it says dues paid. If you just set it to yes, that means it will keep that box checked when you do check-in automatically until you change this.
Okay,
We added something this last year that allows you to say how many they've prepaid for. So if somebody comes up to you and says, the parent comes up every so often and gives you some money, say, okay, here's $5 for however long that lasts, and let me know when I have to pay again.
okay,
Then you can go into there and say they paid for 4 weeks or paid for 5 weeks. And then when you go into the check-in screen, that box will be automatically checked, and each time you mark them as present, it will decrement that number by 1. And then when it gets down to 0, then it will no longer be checked anymore,
okay. So
indicating
keep
that they
track
have
of
to pay
when
for
they're
it.
there and
Yeah.
awesome.
So you can use that way as well.
Is there a way to, like, customize, like, so that it would, on their screen come up that their uniform was paid for or not, or just dues?
Not on the main screen here, but you certainly can have a checkbox down here that says
Right.
that.
Just
Certainly,
add it.
yeah,
We just have it.
And then
Yeah.
I'd have to,
you can just add that.
And then where can you run a report that says, because before we give awards, we wanna make sure that they've actually paid for their book, and their,
If it's a checkbox on the custom field, then you just go into the screen here, down here at the bottom, where it says custom options. If I choose needs medical release, and then I run that report,
yeah,
that's gonna give me a list of everybody who has that box checked
okay.
in that custom field. It only works for check boxes on the custom fields, not the fill-in. But if that box is checked, this will be a list of everybody who's got that box checked.
Okay.
And it doesn't work the flip way. I can't get a list of everybody who doesn't have it checked. So make sure you word the checkbox that way, even if it means don't have a uniform that you put on there, so that when the checkbox comes up, that's the list you're going to want.
Okay.
Which is why we have it needs registration and not registered. Because we want a list of everybody who who isn't registered, so that's why we termed it that way, as opposed to is registered.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so that's payments. So then the next level is, maybe I want the software to help me keep track of ordering. This is how we use it at our club. Someone comes up to me and says, I need this particular training material for Sparks. So I go into order entry, I've got my order started for today, or if I don't, I can click on add order to start a new one. I add an item, find that in the list, select it, click on add, now I can move on, it's in there. I'm done with that, it's kind of my memory, you know, for that they need to do that stuff. And then a uniform the same way. Actually, when you do a payment entry, let me go back here. There's an add to order. So if I put in something that has an inventory item in this field here, there's this button here. If I click on that button, it'll automatically put it into the existing order or new order based on which one I checked. Now it's in there. So I can do that automatically. Now it keeps accumulating in my order. At the end of the day, I make some extra entries based on, I'm short on blue jewels or whatever, I want to add some more things. Now I've got my order done. It's in here. It keeps track of it for me. Now I've got some ways that I can actually do what I do with that. I can print this out, hard copy, fax it, whatever else I might want to do with it. That way you could use that sheet of paper, log on to the Awana website. It's not too bad. Enter catalog quantity, catalog quantity, catalog quantity. When I've got those numbers right in front of me, it goes pretty fast. What we prefer to do is you set up your email client, and I click on order email. That will take that order and send a document just like this, just like you see on the back of your catalog, to Awana headquarters at here's my order at awana.org, and they will take that information and they will place the order for you. So all I have to do is click on order email and I'm done.
So you have all of the catalog numbers already in ARC?
That's correct.
I did not know that. Okay, thank you. So
All the updated information with studies and all that, it's
All the new information's in there.
You just made a whole bunch of great copies.
So can we set up the maximum inventory level?
Yes,
every time?
that will be the next step I get, John. I'm not there quite yet.
Oh, did you just ask about heavy?
Yes, it's new, the new stuff's there, yeah.
Is it, because it's listed, at least mine is still listed as, lamb.
That's what I was gonna ask,
Is
is
it
it desktop?
Have you what's your version that you're running?
I upgraded to the new one.
You are, okay.
Okay.
I might have to look at it later.
Yep, the next two sessions,
Yeah,
we'll take a look
yeah.
at it, okay?
Okay.
All right. Okay, so that's the ordering process now. So I've talked about payments, talked about ordering. Now the most complex I'm leaving for last, that's the inventory. This is by far the one that most people don't do because it's complicated and it's not really saving them any time, or things seem to disappear and my orders never match what they are to begin with. But again, you make those choices and decide. But here's the process you can do. So in inventory entry, so under inventory entry is a list of things that I have in my club. So this is a subset of all the numbers that are available in the order. When I click on that find button on the order entry screen, I can type some descriptions, and if I type TNT, it'll limit to only those that say have TNT in the description or whatever. But that list is basically everything that's in the catalog. Inventory entry is only the things I have entered that I'm using. So I put in here what I want to track. I don't have to track everything that's in the Awana catalog or even everything I might have on my shelf. Only the things I want the program to keep track of. So I can make this list shorter if I want to. Also, when I put something in the inventory entry, I have the ability of changing what the sell price is. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to go back 1 minute and go back to the order entry and show you one more thing. When my order has come back in, I have an add to inventory button, and what that will do is it'll automatically take everything that's in the order entry and put it into the inventory and bump the numbers up. So it says 6 items were increased, there was a new item that wasn't there before that gets added in, and that gets created already. The program is smart enough to know the difference between an item in order and an item in inventory, and what I mean by that is if I order one package of 50 blue jewels, it's 1 in an order, but it's 50 in inventory. Does that make sense? So it knows the difference between those two things, and we'll make that adjustment. Also, 5 packs of books, same idea. If I buy a 5-pack of book, it's a 1 in the order, and it's a 5 in the inventory. So it makes that distinction automatically. Okay, so now back to inventory. I can put information in the inventory that way, as well as when I'm starting out, I'm going to have to manually go in and say, add, put in my catalog number, description, and fill in that stuff on hand, as I start out. So, what I was going to say is, when I do that, the reason why I went back is, when I do that, the default price that's going to go into my order is the price that I paid for it if it's a single item, or the price that I paid for it divided by the quantity. So, if it's a 5-pack, it's going to take the 5-pack count and divide it by 5 and put that in there. Whatever it is, it's probably not a nice round number. It's probably $3.99, $2.95, whatever they have in their catalogs. So I can change that in the inventory to be my sell price. And that's rounded up to whatever you want it to be, nice and even, $4 or whatever. And the reason why you do that is, now this goes back to payments. When I go into a payment entry and call up an item out of inventory, it's going to give me the price that I've entered rather than the calculated price in the order. So does that make sense? It's going to take this value that I put in here as my default instead of the nice, the $2.99 or whatever. So I can make that help me fill in the amount more correctly of what I'm charging. This is my control about what I charge. If I want to add in shipping adjustments or whatever adjustments I want to make in the price, that does that for me. And by the way, inventory entry, you don't have to limit to just the Awana catalog. You can put extra things. If you introduce other inventory into your system, you're buying something off on some other catalog or whatever, and it's part of your Awana club, you go in here. I might suggest that you put a letter in front of the item number or something else rather than using a 5-digit number just in case, because that number might get used by Awana in the future. So just something to keep it separate. But you definitely can keep track of other things outside the Awana catalog if you wanted to. Okay, so now I think back to your question about inventory quantities and ordering levels and things like that. After I've entered my description and my sell price and how many I currently have on hand, I've got 2 other items I need to discuss: the order level and the order quantity. The order level basically is saying, when I get to this level in my ordering system, that is when I want to do a reorder. So maybe books, I would say when I get down to 2 or 3, I might want to get some more. If green jewels, on the other hand, if I'm down to 2 or 3, I'm in trouble. You know that as well as I do. So I'm going to maybe set that level to 30 or 40. So this is basically depending on the item and what it is, what your order level is. But whatever it's going to be, when it falls below that value, it's going to automatically reorder it. That's your order level quantity, the trigger that says I'm going to do a new order. I want to order some more. And then the next item is the order quantity. Simply, okay, you want me to order some, how many do you want me to order? If it's maybe you want to order 100 green jewels at a time, maybe 50, depending on the size of your club. Or maybe I want to get a 5-pack of books all the time whenever I run out, or maybe just 2 or 3, again, depending on the size of your club. You decide what it does. If I put in there that I want 8 books when my order level falls below 2, I know it's a weird example, but it's smart enough to know that there is a 5-pack of books available and will order you 1 5-pack and 3 individuals. So you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. So once you've got all this information entered in and you've got the order levels the way you want, you click on this replenish inventory, and that's going to do that for you. It's going to say, I'm going to go through the system, look at all the quantities of all the inventory items, and reorder anything that needs to be reordered. So I click on yes. Oh yes, I forgot about this. I've got some inventory items that are old and no longer there. I should be getting rid of those. So now they've added those all to my system. Now, nothing's been ordered yet, so you don't need to worry about that. They're in my system and in my list. Now I've got to basically go back and do my sanity check and say, yes, I really did want to get those, or maybe I didn't put the number right or something else. And then I can go in and I can right-click on one and say delete entry, and get that out of there if I didn't really want it, okay? So this is kind of your process to go through and check it,
If
so,
you say delete entry, will it pop up next time? So like say you decide, I don't really wanna order that now, but I want it to come up next time
yes,
when I say.
because I haven't changed any criteria in my inventory entry, it's still below the order level, yep, so it still will come up. Yep, I'm only saying I'm not gonna order it now. Okay,
Do you have to use all the fields, like if you don't wanna set a sale price for it?
if you don't wanna set a sale price, you don't wanna set a sale price because you're not gonna use it in payment entry ever, or?
Right. So
Okay,
if we're not using the payment entry, as far as we do a registration fee at the beginning of the year, that's to cover everything.
okay. If you don't use the payment entry, then you don't have any way to reduce the inventory, because that's how you reduce the inventory, is by checking that box in the payment entry. Unless you would manually go in and change the number in inventory entry.
Well,
They
we
paid
do-
for it, so.
Yeah, we do
they're
take a
gonna-
payment at the beginning of the year, so we could check that box.
Yeah, and then it would
wouldn't
reduce the inventory.
generate that.
But it wouldn't consecutively keep doing that.
No,
Yeah,
you have
the
to
only
make an
thing
entry for every time you
Right.
reduce the inventory. So maybe it's a better option to manually go in and adjust the quantity at some point. Okay? So that kind of gives you an idea of the overall capabilities, and again, you can kind of see just by talking about it, oh, that's gonna be a nightmare, I don't wanna go there, you know? Or maybe these two things I can make use of that would help, but the rest of them I don't wanna use. So you kind of have to decide on that and decide for what you wanna do. Okay? Are there any other questions before we break? Okay? After lunch, I've got 2 sessions, workshop 3 and 4, for hands-on. So you're just gonna be basically free to walk around. You got your laptops you brought with you. I can work with them. My wife and I will both have laptops. If you didn't bring anything with you and you just wanna sit and play around with either the desktop version or the online version, feel free to do that, and we'll just, smartphones, whatever you want, we'll just help you out any way we can.